Hi, welcome back to Unique Minds of the Okanagan. I'm Robb, and we're on location in Penticton with Chris Featherson, the driving key force behind the Flannel Contract. How are you, brother?
I'm so good, Rob. Thanks for coming. Welcome to my basement.
Thank you for having us.
I'm very excited to get to sit down and chat with you.
I'm very excited, so let's hop right into it. Let everyone know who you are, where you're from, and how you became a musician.
Well, today I'm Chris from Earth. I grew up in a small town called Huntsville, Ontario. Went to Ottawa shortly after that and moved to the Okanagan about 6 years ago.
Crazy. You've only been here for 6 years?
It feels like less, but when I do the math, it's about 6 years, yeah.
Wow, I didn't actually realize you're from Ontario. How long have you been, what got you into basically being a musician? Like, how did you start?
Well, I owe my parents a huge shout out for that one. They got me in piano lessons when I was pretty young, and I stuck with that until I realized piano wasn't very cool. And at that point, I started picking up this old guitar that my brother never played. It was about high school by the time I started picking up the guitar, and it was about the size I am now, playing this child-sized acoustic guitar, and it looked hilarious for about a year when my parents thought, if he's going to play this tiny, ridiculous guitar for an entire year, we better stop pushing him towards the piano and just let him do what he's doing. They ended up buying me an electric guitar for Christmas after I'd spent a year with that acoustic, and it just kind of took off from there. Started making music with bands in high school. My high school had an incredible music program with really inspiring teachers who have always stayed in the back of my mind, and incredible opportunities with coffee shops and jam nights that the school was sort of putting on. So started a little high school band, moved away to Ottawa where I attended university and played in the punk scene there with a couple of different bands, and then moved to the Okanagan where top priority was forming yet another band.
Love it. How was the Ontario scene? Like, especially the punk scene. I know the metal scene's really good, but I've never actually heard anything about their punk scene.
The punk scene in Ottawa was a little slow. Certainly not a thriving demand for it. The Ottawa scene was a little bit more into the blues with a lot of the kind of government older crowd that lived there. A lot of people working for the country. But then there was also, between the two universities, a very sort of energetic young population of students. So the punk scenes and the metal scenes did fairly well out there. It was never hard finding bands and never hard booking shows. Now, just like any other scene, there was a few shows midweek to an empty bar where you're playing for drink tickets and, nothing else. But it's all part of the process.
Yeah, it is. So, coming to the Okanagan, how was your first... going from the East Coast where the music scene is massive and there are tons of competition to the West Coast where there's like a very small competition base within the Okanagan itself?
Definitely a different vibe, especially moving to the Okanagan from Ottawa. You're going from this city center where you're playing music every night of the week to the Okanagan and Penticton specifically. You're not really playing unless it's a Friday or a Saturday night. You're really having trouble selling those midweek shows. So it's a lot of a different speed from the city scene to the West Coast scene. But one of the biggest differences is the Ottawa scene, particular the Ontario scene, is incredibly seasonal because it's so hard to tour, to play, to do anything through the winter. Everyone's got 3 feet of snow at the end of their driveway. They're not digging themselves out to go to a bar in the middle of the week, maybe even not on a Friday night. It's just cold and dark through the whole winter. So in the Okanagan, you see a little bit more of a steady season through the winter, with the mountains bringing a lot of those ski folks to town. Still a little bit slow as Penticton drops off January, February, but it's a lot nicer working through the winter on the West Coast.
Fair enough. That's I could definitely see that being a main factor in changing the dynamic change and it being a lot easier here versus that with the snow in the winter. I didn't never really put two and two together about how much snow they actually get on the East Coast. So
It is overwhelming at times, and the driving factor to leaving that city and coming out west.
yeah, is that what kind of gave you? Is that why you started hosting shows here yourself? Is just you saw the way the scene was here and decided I want to do it my own way?
There was certainly part of it, wanting to have more of an influence on that scene. You know, when you're at the mercy of whatever bar or booker you can find, you're getting what you get. But as more of a driving member of the community and the local scene, it really helps us to book shows on our terms. But it was more of an accident falling into place. I didn't intentionally set out to become a key part of the local scene. I didn't intend to become a booker promoter. It really just fell into place as we were playing this local dive, Clancy's, all the time, and we loved Clancy's. They treated us so well, but they didn't really have the know-how behind putting on shows. Mm-hmm. And so we were always dealing with this one waitress. Shout out to Vic, the machine. She was incredibly helpful to the Flannel Contract getting started in Penticton and giving us that platform. And the Flannel Contract brought this level of professionalism and of experience and knowledge about putting on shows that she wasn't really getting from other bands. So I was getting a lot of calls when Victoria was booking these other shows saying, "Hey Chris, I've got this other band coming. They're asking me these questions I don't really know. Can you kind of help translate? Can you act as this middleman?" And I started acting as this middleman, helping Victoria communicate with the bands. And eventually Victoria moved on to other stuff. She's moved out to Vancouver Island now, leaving this vacancy at Clancy's in the sort of booking side of things. Mm-hmm. And so it moved from just being this middleman to taking on more of the responsibility from Vic around booking. And then once she left, I stepped right in and don't bartend at Clancy's or anything like that. I strictly work with them in the booking scene. And that kind of grew to working with other venues and trying to set up bands and shows now that I've got this incredible network at different spots. I get bands reaching out to me saying, "Hey, I hear you're the guy in Penticton. We'd love to come play," but they don't really have the Clancy's sort of vibe. So I'm trying to redirect to other venues, put them in touch with other people in the scene. And it really just accidentally fell into place, but has been an incredible aid to the band. And now that I've got the network, more know-how, it's really just helping out the band by accident.
Cool. So yeah, it is kind of funny to see how the progression did, because I think Vic was one of the reasons that we ended up playing at Clancy's for the first time as well. And yeah, shout out to Vic, she's awesome. She's good peoples. So there's a lot of things. There are a lot of points there that I loved and want to talk on, but when it comes to you working with Clancy's, you've also went through helping them through the owner transition and keeping that slightly afloat with music coming in while they were dealing with the new owners and transitioning to Jody taking over. And the new owners are a lot more inclusive when it comes to shows, as I found before. I guess it was open to shows, but now it seems like they're really open towards metal, punk rock, and kind of wanting to be what Voodoo's used to be or Fibonacci's used to be for Penticton, which is really nice to see.
Absolutely. And there's a few things that went into play there. As the bar changed ownership, I really wanted to get in early with the new owners, try to make a good impression, let them know that the music program at Clancy's was working. The new owners wanted to do a little bit more of a sports bar kind of thing with Clancy's. But as I kept pushing this music program, and as the music program continued to prove itself with great turnouts and just good crowds, it was hard to deny that it really worked and that people knew Clancy's as a place for live music. So it was a little bit rocky as the ownership changed, with the new owners wanting to change the direction, but as you said, Jody, one of the new owners, definitely wanted to push that music program, so he encouraged me to stick with it, and so that we could prove to the other owner that the music program really was worth doing. And then this new venue in Penticton opened up called The Hub, and The Hub started booking a lot of cover bands, a lot of blues, a lot of the stuff for the older crowd, because there is definitely a older population in Penticton, being a great retirement community. And it left this awesome hole for Clancy's to just continue scooping up all of the local bands that aren't getting that exposure, all of the metal and the punk bands. And the Hub definitely does put on any show, but specifically on the weekends, they really focus on more of their, exactly right, leaving the metal and punk really open for Clancy's to provide an opportunity and a platform for newer, smaller bands that aren't getting booked anywhere else.
Yeah, and I've noticed, like, my buddy Ryan does the bookings for the Metal Mondays at the Hub, and that's a hard one to do. It sounds good, but Monday nights are very hard to get anyone to come out, no matter where you are. Even Vancouver, you're going to have a hard time getting a Monday show.
Absolutely. In Penticton, Monday nights are tough.
Yeah, even in the winter, there's tumbleweeds rolling by. So it's Clancy is, and like, you helped us big time when it came to us putting on Enigmatic Music Fest, which was hosted at Clancy's, and I kind of think that, along with the shows you were hosting, was a huge eye opener as to what not the metal community, because there's more than just metal played at the festival, but
it was a
the
very
metal community,
varied fest,
right? Like, it was varied. There was punk rock and metal to some of the heaviest stuff I've ever heard, and we flew a member from North Carolina up here just to perform his first show with his band. So, like, Clancy's was very gracious enough to host that, and it really made me think back of, like, when I was growing up here. So it would have been both before either of you were here, but when Voodoo's, rest in peace, Voodoo's, Donna used to host. Donna is one of my mom's my mom's best friend, and she was the owner of Voodoo's. And it's nice to see venue owners who are willing to let bands with no reputation in start and allow them to start that foot into the music industry, because cover bands are, I love cover bands and all, but I mean, when it comes realistically, why are you paying somebody who can play somebody else's music for $2,000 a night when you're not playing bands that are writing originals the same amount? So there's a weird thing for me when it comes to cover bands, because especially, like, oh, well, you only book cover bands on weekends. Like, those kind of things is, like, that's really going to be a detriment to your facility worse than anything else. Like, if you're not catering to what is popular, like, yeah, it is an old town, but a retirement capital can only be a retirement capital for so long. You know, in a couple of years, when things happen, and, like, Penticton's just going to slowly crumble without bringing in some youth.
That's right.
And music scene is where that youth thrives. You know what I mean? Like, if you can bring in new bands, yeah, they're maybe underage, but, like, don't let them drink, let them perform, and let them leave. Give them that opportunity, because that's, where else are they going to get it? We always talk about, like, the government's always talking about, we need to do stuff for the youth. Give them music. That helps them keep them off the streets. Like, if all of us didn't have music, I guarantee we'd be different people.
Oh, absolutely. It's hard to get into trouble when you spend all your money on music gear and all of your time practicing.
Exactly. And, like, for Clancy's to be, there's a handful of venues in Penticton. There used to be a lot. And Penticton, I'd say, has 3 venues at this point. It has Clancy's, the Hub, and not Highway 97. Is that what it is called? No.
Highway 97 is
Cannery.
trying to put on shows from here to there, but
yeah,
not
the Cannery
really.
is the one I'm thinking of.
And the Cannery is a great platform for a lot of the smaller coffee shop kind of stuff. They really like the intimate shows with acoustic performers.
Yeah, see, so, like, it's Clancy's definitely has that, and being like the promoter is kind of an upper hand, right? Because growing up, we built a huge music scene in Penticton. Like me and Harley and our friends, and we had a really wicked scene. And then as soon as we all left, it died.
Yeah.
And to see it coming back with new people is kind of like, it's been such a, it makes me smile watching what you do, because it's like seeing that passion that we had being brought back and it continuing and living still to this day is kind of like, it's awe-inspiring for me. And that's why I kind of like enjoy working with you in any way I can. Is because it's just very like-minded, and all you care about is the scene.
I get really excited to hear that. Like you said, a lot of the scene, as Penticton was before either Kynan or I got here. But we've got Harley behind the drums, who was born and raised in Penticton, was part of the original scene so many years ago with the formation of Hardball before their hiatus. Hearing all of these stories about what Penticton was and what the music scene was, and another name that was huge in the Penticton scene of Robb McLaren, putting on all these shows at the library so they could be all ages. And hearing all these stories about what the Penticton scene used to be, it just helps me to keep working towards building it up again. Knowing where it's been, to know what we can work towards, and to hear people from the original scene saying it's really cool to see it build back up again. That's what I'm doing it for, is the people, the community that need this scene.
It's funny that you mentioned the library shows. I think the first show I ever booked was with Dave Mai's band called Ruckus. And it was a emo punk cover band. We did some originals, but we booked Bleeding Alarm, Push for Protection, and Us at the library. And that is the day I met JP and the Pasties started. It was me performing on stage at the library, and I put the mic to his face and he sang the lyrics, and it was like, "You're my new best friend." And
He's in.
Like 20 years later or whatever, we're still best friends. And it's just like, those were the days. And those, like, the turnouts that we used to have were insane, dude. Like, I get goosebumps thinking about the Kelowna shows back in the day for Stutterfly, when you have like 200 kids at a church and they're all moshing. All of them. Like,
just packed in there.
Throwing elbows and fists just to Stutterfly. Like, these nobodies. And then all of a sudden they blew up. And it was like, that was really when, like Hanio, DFY, Push for Protection, those are the founding members. Hardball, Karma Black, like that is Penticton's backbone for the music scene. Like, and that was me growing up 10 years old watching them, to opening up for them, to them coming to our shows, to having them open up for me, is a really weird turn of events. But it's like, to see the old groups even coming back, which is a new thing. At Times of Madness, one of Okanagan's best bands, just saw that they're coming back. The music scene, I think, is, especially Penticton, because I get contacted quite a bit about Penticton, and I usually send them to you, because I'm not a booker anymore. I enjoy doing it sometimes, but I'm not going to do it all the time. So you are my go-to guy for Penticton when my friends contact me and ask. So it's cool to see that there's a lot of bands coming through, and bands that I haven't seen their name in years. So
many bands. It's so beautiful to see the scene, such a living, breathing, evolving community of bands that form and hiatus and reform, and then these musicians join those musicians to form new projects,
super groups,
and it's such a Penticton, especially, you get this, I think, more a sense of it on the West Coast than I ever did on the East Coast, of such a supportive scene. And there's hardly ever any bad blood of, oh, well, I was in this band before and I'm not in this band anymore, and so we're not doing with that band anymore. I don't think I've ever seen bands in the West Coast really have bad blood because of past experiences, and it's always just such a supportive, and I don't care who played with who when, it's all about supporting each other and just building each other up in the community.
Yeah, I can personally say, I think out of the hundreds and hundreds of musicians that I've met, there's only ever been one in the entire scene in the Okanagan who I was like, that guy's a little high on himself, and he's just kind of needs to tone it down a bit. But realistically, everyone is extremely humble and wants the same thing, and that is to see the music scene in Penticton and the Okanagan be something that people want to come to. And that was one thing I really wanted to do with the festival, was bring those Vancouver groups here and show them what we do. And we scared them. Like, Penticton is known for throwing down now, which is amazing because, like, the bands do, the fans do, and the venues do. We need the town to be more supportive of the fact that it does have a very vibrant, heavy scene, and to embrace that and stop pushing it to the side for cover bands and single acoustic artists. Yes, we have amazing acoustic artists and bands from Penticton and the Okanagan, but the most famous bands that have ever made it out of the Okanagan are all in the heavy scene. Every single one of them is from heavy. And
That's right.
You have Excision from Kelowna, okay? The biggest DJ on the planet. I'm going to say that openly. Like, everyone knows who Excision is. The dude's from Rutland. Heaviest music possible. Like, the community there didn't even accept him.
Right.
He got huge, and then all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, Excision, that's
And now they're all excited about it.
No one cared until it was too late. You ever seen them play in Kelowna?
Not anymore.
Nope.
Not anymore.
You won't. And that's because the scene probably doesn't support them. In the long run, they're not going to come back and support their town. So for me, with Kelowna or Penticton being, the event center has taken over Prospera. Prospera doesn't get as many big shows as they used to. The event center now gets them. Embrace your local scene, because you never know when they're going to be playing the event center and you're going to be regretting not letting them play at your little bar.
That's right.
Because there's amazing talent hidden here. Amazing talent that just never gets, it just pushed to the wayside because, oh, it's heavy and that's not our crowd. Make it your crowd. How many more breweries do we need? How many more wineries do we need? We don't need 10,000 breweries and 10,000 wineries. We need some venues more like the Dream Cafe who are going to allow us. We need more Clancy's. We need more Brit bars. You know what I mean? Like, let the music happen.
Exactly.
Don't have like that stipulation of, we only play this on certain days.
I've seen a lot more breweries close their doors in the last 5 years of being in Penticton than I have seen bars that are putting on live music. New music venues are opening up, seemingly incredibly successful, when breweries across the street are closing their doors. SOEC is putting on huge metal shows. Lamb of God came through recently. Alice Cooper loves to come to Penticton, yet it's hard for metal bands, for punk bands, for hardcore bands to get a platform here. And especially, you were talking about the city needs to not shy away from this and to provide more opportunities. And specifically, I think we don't really have spaces for young people.
Nope.
The only chance that punk and metal bands get of booking in Penticton is at the dive bars. And yes, exceptions can be made for underage bands to play, but underage bands can't reach underage fans if they're getting an exception to get into the bar, because the bar can't let the fans get in. So, and even when the bands are getting booked, there's a lot of hoops for the bar to jump through. We at Clancy's recently hosted a really young group from Kelowna called Freeze the Fall. I don't know if you've had your eyes on them.
We're going to be interviewing them, actually.
Unbelievably talented.
Yes, they are.
And too young to get into the bars, so we had to jump through a bunch of hoops so that they could play. We had to make them wait in the alley during the other bands just because, while they're not performing, they're not allowed inside. And so it really wasn't an opportunity for them to join the scene, to reach their fans, to reach that community. So Penticton, I would love to see all ages venues, library shows again.
That is one thing I've talked about for years, is that I actually had a conversation with John Horgan about this. During the pandemic, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with Enigma. And the one thing that we lack in BC in general, BC and Alberta, that the East Coast does have is all ages venues and places where bands can safely play without being. Kelowna has a 24-hour noise complaint. You can have your band, the cops called on you at any time during the day in Kelowna.
Penticton's the same way?
Exactly, right? So how are we supposed to
good
jam
neighbor act.
safely? Exactly. So this is one thing I've always pushed towards, is like, you want to stop kids from doing drugs or doing crime on the streets, give them somewhere safe to express that, give them entertainment, give them music, all ages venues. And like, the only all ages venues we have are the amount of holes you have to jump through them to rent them, the liability costs, the insurance that it costs for me. Like, for me to book an all ages show, minimum $1,200 just before even paying the bands. That's just the venue, insurance, and the liability.
Right.
That's
before
sound. That's before paying the bands.
Equipment. Before.
Everything. So how am I supposed to make that back and promote to a younger crowd when all I'm trying to do is inspire them to do something, right? So it's very tough when the city talks. Cities tend to talk a lot about, oh, we support our community and our arts. No, you support a very small section of the arts and community that is only because you can sell that. Acoustic artists and country bands, but it's not what people really want to hear. Like, if you look at what is big in the world and what's popular in our scene, which actually thrives, you'll see that it's our heavy music.
Exactly, right?
Especially in the Okanagan.
Some of the softer stuff, it's safe, it's marketable, but it's not necessarily what the community is asking for or needs right now.
Yeah, and that's kind of one thing that's like, it was really always bugged me about the Okanagan scene, and kind of why I stepped away for a long time, was the politics behind trying to book shows when you're just trying to do something good, and it's just like, there's so many hurdles to get through. You know what I mean? Like, we've seen it from handing out flyers to like where we're at now. Like, the dynamic change and shift is so different that I wish that like venue owners and business owners would see that, especially in Penticton, because since I was young, where Hog's Breath was, we had names that will last forever in Penticton, like Jeremy Head, Max Zaitlin, you know, Shane Koizan. One of the dude opened up for the Dalai Lama. He's from Penticton, and we used to watch him speak his poetry in a coffee shop because the coffee shop was so willing to allow you to be artistic there. If Hog's Breath didn't exist, I don't think that a lot of those people would have made it to where they are. And that was because someone took that initiative to be like, you know what, I'm gonna do something different. Like we were saying, you've seen how many breweries and wineries shut down. It's because you can only have so many wineries and breweries in a town full of 35,000 people.
Exactly. It got way oversaturated, right?
Way. Like, how much beer can you really taste in a year without getting sick of it? Let's be honest. Like, I enjoy the fact that there's breweries and we live here, but realistically, you can't have your entire downtown be breweries and expect to be successful as a town. It doesn't work. You have to have art. You can't just have alcohol.
Right.
So, like, it just doesn't make sense for me that you've got all these perfect venues and they're all just breweries. Like, Slackwater is the perfect venue, too, to have a massive stage.
Rest in peace.
Slackwater's not around.
Slackwater closed its doors last month.
No,
Yeah.
that makes me so sad.
There goes
Liam was doing so good.
Liam was awesome,
man.
He was always
rest in peace, Slackwater. That's sad.
Yeah, he was very supportive of the band, very helpful with us getting the DOA opening spot a couple of years ago.
And the fundraisers.
They hosted the first and third annual fundraisers, the first and fourth fundraisers. They hosted two of our fundraisers.
Yeah.
Yeah, Slackwater was an awesome spot. I don't know if they were pushing the music program or handling it well. They really focused more on the beer side of things. And when that disappeared in the winter, I think it really hurt them because
I can imagine,
it went great with the tourists. People loved the rooftop patio at Slackwater, but they were not focusing enough on the other things to draw people in, specifically the things that draw the locals in. And yes, they did host a few bands, few music nights and open mics, but I don't know if they were leaning into that enough. And it was really too bad because the potential there was incredible. And again, talking about hearing stories of what the scene used to be and what was Slackwater before it was Slackwater.
Mule.
It was the Mule. And the Mule, from what I've heard, utilized that space in a much more entertainment kind of fashion. Now, the nightclub thing in Penticton, I guess, didn't work out, but if that was kept with a stage and utilized as a music venue, it's just too bad.
There's two venues that I wish would have never changed what they were, and they were both nightclubs, and I wish they would have just embraced it in live music more, which is what the Element was, because it had a wicked stage, and I performed with Mercules on that stage, and man, that's a fun stage. And yeah, the Blue Mule had a wicked stage too. That was a really fun venue to play. But Slackwater was, oh, that makes me sad, because that is the prime venue right there. For anyone who wants to buy an all-ages venue, boom. You've got the stage, you've got the space, you've got everything, and it's downtown.
I'm so sorry I had to be the one breaking that news to you. I'm
fine.
afraid Slackwater, I don't think they're going to be selling the space. I think it's going to end up just sort of like we watched Bad Tattoo close its doors, no longer doing the pizzas, but now all of that space is just for canning. They're still making beer there. I think they're going to do the same thing with Slackwater. It's just going to be turned into a production facility. I don't know if something new's going in there. I think they're still going to be making beer.
Oh, so they still own the building and still running it. They just shut the doors.
Yeah.
For, like, people to come in and
Yeah,
taste.
it's not been sold or anything like that.
Okay.
They're just closing the tasting room, and I think the current plan is that they're going to be continuing to make Slackwater beer. But again, like, that's just a great spot.
It is.
That's not being utilized as a third space for the community, you know?
That's awesome.
We're watching malls all close their doors. People need third spaces, especially young people. Not just young people, but people need somewhere to go after work, and you can't just walk past the canning facilities. You need to
get in there.
Have somewhere to be, something to do.
I'm curious what they would do with Shadford buildings, because I know that they were using those as art spaces for people who are doing woodworking and pottery at one point, and then I know that shut down, but it'd be cool to see them bring that back, because that was a really cool aspect, and then have venues in there, because that'd be...
The Shadford could be a really cool spot. I've seen a lot of art in there. They often use the auditorium for galleries and stuff like that, and you're right, that Shadford Center had a very cool stage, awesome auditorium, actually a wicked green room behind the stage that I think a lot of people didn't know about.
Everything, maybe so.
Not sure what's going to go on there. I think the Shadford's got a little bit of politics behind it. There was something about the city owned the building and was leasing it to the Arts Council for $1 a year or something like that. And then it was becoming unfeasible. So I think there's a lot of politics behind the Shadford Center. It could be a very cool venue, but I think that building's a little bit old as well. You'd be worried about the structural integrity there.
No,
I've been in the basement of that building, and I'm not sure I'd want to be down there. Well, there's a auditorium full of people dancing around above.
That's where my grade 9 math class was, bro.
That's right. You went to high school in the
I did.
Shadford.
I graduated the last graduating class in the old school.
Very cool.
Funny. So to get back on point with the fundraisers, because you mentioned the fundraiser.
That's right. I'll have to talk about the fundraisers.
I want to dive into those, because that's one of the main things about you and the community, is that you not only host shows for the community and to constantly bring people in to make Penticton a better place, but you also have put on a fundraiser for 4 or 5 years now.
4 years now. We've had 4 annual fundraisers. This year is going to be the 5th.
Why don't you let us know what it's for and what made you inspired to help the Foundry?
Yeah, of course. What made us help the Foundry specifically? We were just talking about third spaces, how especially young people need somewhere to go. And the Foundry is a bit of that. It's a drop-in center where people can hang out after school. But not only is it a drop-in center, the Foundry provides tons of resources for these young people. The Foundry does mental health support, physical health support if these young people need help getting in touch with doctors and prescriptions and stuff like that. And so third spaces are very important to me in the community, and I know that the community needs stuff like this. So when we started to talk about the fundraiser, and I had heard about this place, the Foundry, it seemed like a no-brainer to me. I remember going to a drop-in center after high school. Growing up, it was just sort of down the street. My folks usually worked late, so I knew that there wasn't going to be anybody at home. So oftentimes I would just go to this drop-in center called the Door. It eventually got renamed to the Drop Zone. It's a very cool place for young people to hang out and just get to, know other people. And the Foundry reminded me of that, and growing up, and how that really helped me find my place in the community and meet people and get to know others. So the Foundry, it was a no-brainer. When we started the Flannel Contract, we got to the first winter, and my birthday falls just before Christmas, and I wanted to put on a really big show. And I'll let it slip here on camera, a little bit of a secret. It was slightly selfish that I thought, how can I get everyone to throw me a really big birthday party? And I thought, we're going to make the birthday party a fundraiser. So it's not really for me. It's for the community. But we get a huge party on my birthday, and it's not for me at all, but I get to, party on my birthday. And when I pitched this idea to the lads about doing a fundraiser, there was absolutely no hesitation. The Flannel Contract was behind me 100%. Incredibly helpful with canvassing the community to get support and donations for the event, and it's just been incredible to be doing this with the guys.
Cool to see here, like, why you decided to choose that. Like, growing up and choosing to go to a community center, and it's kind of, for me, it's totally a different concept. How old are your siblings? How much older?
I've got one older brother. He's about a year and a half ahead of me.
Okay, so not too far.
No, we were very close in age, but as many brothers are, not very close growing up.
Yeah. Yeah, no, me and my brother just started being real close in the last, like, 5-ish years, maybe. Before it was just kind of like typical brothers. Now we're actually, like, understand each other as people. Because that's funny, because I find that you going there as a young kid growing up and spending your time there to kind of, like, keep yourself entertained and not to, like, sit at home and do bad things or whatever, right? Like what young kids do, but to coming out here and wanting to make change and being like, you know what, I could technically do all this stuff for myself, but, like, I would much rather give back.
Gotta give back. The more you give to your community, the more your community is going to give to you, and it all takes a collective effort.
It does. And I definitely think that sense of community is what's lacking globally. There's a lot of disconnect everywhere going on, whether it be your political agenda, your religious views, which rapper you're following. You know what I mean? There's so many different reasons to not be connected that it's kind of cool to see people that are fighting to connect community. Because when I grew up, you could go to the neighbor and ask for sugar. If I go to my neighbor right now and ask for anything, I'm probably going to be like, who the hell are you and why you're at my door? You know what I mean? It's just the times have changed to a point where we're so global that, like, on our phones and social media and everything that's going on globally, that we're like, don't even know who's next door to us.
Exactly.
And we're worried about, like, oh, we're safe, but we don't know anyone in our community, like, at all. As we're growing up, we used to know who the neighbor was, who they were related to. So to build that sense of community again, but through music, and not just music, because you helped with Brent with the other day with his live painting. You guys did music for that, but you are constantly out there helping people out of your own heart. Like, it's not because it's giving you, any credibility that's going to make you further advanced in anything other than what you're trying to accomplish. Like, you're not going to become the next Kanye helping local people, but to the community, you're going to be as valuable in the sense that you're constantly bringing value to the community, where the community needs to start bringing its value to its artists, is what I think. Pardon me. Like you've said before, we have a lot of amazing venues, just not really interested in expanding their palette, entertainment-wise. Like, they'll keep the typical rock bands and stuff like that, but just like break out, have a hip-hop artist come, you know, have a comedian come out, have a different style or something different come out, because sticking to the same food every night gets boring. Same with entertainment. Just constantly watching the same TV show, watching the same sports, you know what I mean? Like,
yep, it's all about variety. So many people out there who are into so many different things. You need to offer a range of entertainment. One of the reasons that the Flannel Contract has not, and hopefully will never, lock in on a particular genre is we want to provide a range of entertainment, a range of music. We're incredibly diverse people, not just between the three of us, but each of us individually are so diverse. You got to bring as much as you can to the table and not get stuck in, oh, this worked one time, we're just going to do this from now on.
To touch base on a question that we asked Kynan, what has been your personal biggest struggle with being a musician or with the flannel?
It's kind of funny because I feel like Kynan had a different answer than I'm going to give, and then the two of you later ended up talking about exactly what I'm going to say, and it's the interpersonal relationships, managing the dynamic of three incredibly passionate individuals. We all care so much about this project and have a way we want to see it go, and we've all got different backgrounds, different schedules, different temperaments, different times where we're high and low, and to bring all of that together can be tumultuous. Trying to balance everything and not let that affect the personal relationships between me and these guys, because over the years I've grown incredibly close with them, and it would be such a shame for a difference in opinion musically to tear all that apart. So the biggest challenge is absolutely just working together and putting yourself aside a little bit, because we've all got such strong feelings about how we want it to go and what it should be looking like, and yeah, it can be difficult. Absolutely.
Do you guys have one person who makes the final decision? Like, if you all can't agree, just one person says, "Okay, this is how it's going."
No, it's why we've got an odd number.
That's funny.
We've thought about adding another guitar player. Rhythm lets me, focus more on the singing, or we've thought about bringing singers in. But the dynamic of just the three of us means there's almost never a split decision of 2 and 2. So it is usually 2 against 1, and even that we try to avoid and prefer to move forward unanimously. But the odd number certainly helps, that we do not have a clear leader. We do not have somebody who gets a final say. It's not my project because I'm the guitar player, front man. It's you'll watch a show and see Kynan sing as much as I do with his own kind of personality and presence. So there's no clear front man, I wouldn't say, in the Flannel Contract. There's no clear band leader. It is a very collaborative, very unanimous. We don't like to, have any sort of hierarchy.
No, I like that. I asked because sometimes it comes down to with our band being, we're 4 now, but before we were 5, coming down to a decision sometimes usually comes down to me and Andy. I find that we're the dads. We're the ones that say, okay, no, it's either not going to work or it's going to work. And the other guys trust us enough to just be like, yeah, we know you guys know what you're doing. But there's definitely many times where I think Andy's wanted to choke me because he's frustrated with me, and I guarantee vice versa. But we have worked together for 6 years now. Andy's also 20 years older than me, which people don't realize. Like, Andy's same age as my mom, and I work with him, and we work really well. And Norm and I are the same age, so there's a big difference in the dynamic of our band. Andy has 20 years experience on us, so when Andy speaks, we tend to all listen. You know what I mean? Versus like,
he's not just pulling this from nowhere, right? He's seen it.
We jokingly call him Dad, and that's because he's wise. He is the wizard of the band. That's how I like to call him. But there's been many times where we haven't talked for weeks as a band because like decisions, or like recently where we parted with our vocalist because of different musical opinions. And that's the hardest, is like you said, you don't want to lose that friendship with your best friends who you've created this with, but sometimes it happens, and it's really sad to lose those people that you absolutely love and would die for, in a sense that like you're never going to talk again. And it's really sad to put yourself in that perspective, because like you put so much energy and like emotion into creating this little baby for it to, you know,
Yep.
to choose what's best for it is very difficult. And I think that that's where like only parents would understand when they're like divorcees, you know what I mean? Like kids of divorce are like would really relate to that. And I think that's, being in a band is like, honestly, it's harder than a relationship. Like my relationship is very easy to maintain. Band relationships are not, especially when you've got 5 guys, big egos, big opinions, big attitudes, right? But like we were saying, it's nice when you find that group that sings. And like, I've worked with Harley for many years, and I know Harley is a great person, but if Harley doesn't like something, he's going to tell you. He's a Gemini.
That's right. He's got his opinions.
He's got his opinion. He's just like me. And that's the thing, is like, you two are very, I could tell that you two are the laid back ones, as where Harley is like me. We're both Geminis. We're the hard-headed ones. I'll admit that we're probably the hard-headed ones. I'm very hard-headed. Meg can probably vouch for that. If I'm locked in on something, very hard to get my like snap me out of it, especially musically. If like I know that this rhythm works this way.
Yep.
Arguing with Norm isn't going to happen. Norm knows. There's just, we've created that sense of trust, I guess it is, over the 6 years we've been a band, just like you guys have, where you fall into place. You know where your place is, kind of, and there is no leader. You know when you need to step up and when you need to step down.
We've all learned to read each other very well, and you know, having those strong opinions is incredibly helpful, because you're never guessing where he's at. You know, he'll tell you, and we move from there.
Yeah.
And it's not personal, it's not petty.
No.
It's great, because it gives you this firm sense, and it's great in a drummer to
He's
have
very
that
logic.
sense of confidence, and that, because you know, he's passionate about it, and when that drummer can really sit back there and communicate and drive, it makes everything else so much easier.
Yeah, and he's very passionate about what he does. And if he loves something, that's when his passion really shines. And I'm the same way. Like, if I'm passionate about something, it may come off as, like, aggressive, or, like, I may be sounding like I'm being mean, but it's like, I'm just stoked on what's happening, you know what I mean? So it's kind of hard to, like...
so excited about this.
Yeah, and I feel like bands always have that. And that was one thing that I loved about Harley, was, like, watching that excitement on his face the moment, like, he's like, because then it just drives you to do it. And, you know what I mean? And you three have that on stage, where it's just going like this.
Yeah.
It's just constant energy flow shift, and then at the end it's like big hug.
Gotta do the hug.
Yeah.
Never missed a hug, I don't think. And one of the things that I hate about playing live is not being able to see Harley, because he's sitting behind us. Here in the basement when we're practicing, I get to see locking eyes with both Kynan and Harley, and out of the corner of my eye, if I'm not paying attention, Harley will do a little fill that gets him all excited, and you just see the smile come across his face, and we'll lock eyes, and does that kick the song up into a whole nother level. And you talk about how we pass the energy around on stage, and it's a little bit hard doing that backwards pass sometimes, but you just got to trust that he's back there doing his thing, and you feel it.
Half the time you guys are so focused on the crowd and don't even realize that Harley's standing up and just going hard. That's the best part about him, is you never know what he's doing.
I'll see videos later. People have recorded footage. They're like, hey, check out this song. I'm like, what was Harley doing back there?
Yeah.
I didn't even know he was up on the stool.
Yeah, no, that's the thing I loved about him. I don't remember where he picked that up. I want to say it was like Arcade Fire or something along the lines when they were coming out, one of those bands.
Possibly Arcade Fire.
Monotonics. I guarantee if you ask him, he's going to say the Monotonics. They're an Israeli band that he introduced me to. And the drummer will take his drum kit and set it on the crowd in the festivals, and then he climbs up on top and starts playing.
Around it.
And I remember Harley introduced me to them, and I was like, oh my God, these guys are amazing. Crazy live.
I hear a lot of Taylor Hawkins in his drumming as well. I think the Foo Fighters were a big inspiration. The theatrics standing up while he plays, Taylor Hawkins used to do that all the time with the Foo Fighters, and I think there was some inspiration there. At least that's what I hear.
He also had one of the best drum teachers of all time. Steve McPhee, shout out to Steve McPhee. He is one of Canada's top drummers, and he hides in Penticton. You wouldn't even realize who he is if you saw him in person. You'd be like, that's one of Canada's best drummers? Dude is insane and so humble, and just, I can imagine learning drums from him would give you such a passion for drums, like in a different sense than, it's like learning from Taylor, right? Like that passion transcending through your teacher to you is kind of a cool thing. But you can definitely see that Harley throughout the years has always kept that, I don't know what it is, the happiness in his playing, which is something that I miss having in a band almost.
It approaches the instrument with a very childlike wonder.
Yeah.
It's always about exploration with him. He's trying to serve the song past anything else, coming up with incredibly unique drum patterns. It's hardly ever just a 4/4 rock pattern. He's listening and pushing the boundaries all the time.
Yeah, it's cool to see you guys, how far you've progressed realistically. And I think that it'd be really hard to add another member. They would have to be the perfect person.
It would have to fit just right, and we're a weird puzzle to slide into.
Yeah, because you three work so well together. Like, I couldn't actually picture trying to find someone who would match the Flannel's energy. Like, yeah.
As we've been in the studio, if you watch Kainen's video, you'll hear a lot talking about our producer who's been putting together the album, our first album, and I think Easton would fit in the contract pretty well. He's not been able to help himself from adding little bits to every song. We're listening back to the tracks, the masters that he's sending us, and I'll get to a part like, I don't remember playing that. I think Easton added another guitar part. And then he adds little like harmonic leads here and there, and he's adding keys to the background of some of the songs, and he's been able to find areas here and there where the band could use a little bit of extra instrumentation, and it's been really fun to see where he thinks little flourishes and extra bits can come in. And like I said before, I don't think we're ever going up to a 4-piece, but it is fun to think about what it would look like and how that might come out. So if you listen to the recordings, the Spotify tracks, you will hear little bits of our 3.5 member, the producer there.
I love it. That's awesome. So with the 3.5 member, that's awesome. With Flannel Contract, and you guys are currently recording your album. What's been your hardest part in recording? Have you found any aspects very challenging?
Oh, it's very challenging, especially with how long we've been doing these songs live, how many shows we've done up to this point, that the songs have more or less all fallen into a place, but at the same time evolve. You know, the song feels different depending on the night, how we're feeling, how the crowd's feeling, the other bands that we're playing with. We'll try to crank up songs or tune them down. Having these songs unrecorded allows us a lot more freedom with them. And then going into the studio and saying, okay, but what's it going to sound like on Spotify forever from now on? That's really putting you in this place of okay, the song can't be different every time anymore. What does this song need to be specifically? So going into that, a lot of the songs needed a little bit of rearrangement. A lot of the songs needed a little bit of just some sort of fine tunings to really talk about, okay, this song starts differently every night. What do we want to do on the album? So a lot of that stuff that needed to get worked out was a bit of a challenge because you don't know the context the song's going to be in on the other side. But then as well, the guitar solos have been a huge headache for me. Of a lot of the guitar solos, for half the songs, I've gotten something sort of written out, planned in my mind. I've got a map of notes I want to hit, riffs that I want to get in the solo, but some of the solos are very freeform, improvised every night, always changing. So trying to figure out as well what they needed to be to best serve the song in a general context rather than a relative context was a bit of a nightmare. And then hearing myself play over and over again and listening back to take after take after take and trying to decide which ones I liked most. And you just start to hyper focus on the things that you don't love about your playing. And I started to really hyper focus on the things that made me feel bad about myself as a musician. And so it was a very big mental hurdle to overcome with the recordings and having to sit down and listen to yourself and having to focus on the things that maybe don't love about yourself. It was tough, and to not sort of spiral in that was a big challenge.
Yeah, I can understand that 100%, especially when you've put so many years into writing this song and then you're happy with it, performing, people enjoy it, then you actually listen back to it and you're like, what the fuck? I'm sorry again, but like, you know what I mean? Like it's
exactly
right. It's not what you want it to be, and you're still trying to get it to that point, and it's very difficult. We've gone through 4 versions of one song because I'm not happy with the guitar playing. Mm-hmm. Still not happy with it.
Yeah.
I have to just say enough is enough. Because otherwise, yeah, you will spiral. You'll start to overthink things, and I think that's why I love asking this question with bands in studio. Because studio and touring are the 2 things that will separate a band from anything else. Mm-hmm. You can play music all you want live. That's great. Touring really determines if that team is solid. Because if you're on the road together in a small space and having to camp in really bad environments and you're hungry, you're tired.
Budget with next to nothing.
Exactly. You really find who works and which dynamic works. And in studio, you really see... Because somebody can play all night, every night, and you're not hearing them on the other side of the stage. When you actually hear what they're playing, it's a total different thing. Like, for example, Norm just realized that he's been playing a single riff wrong the entire time just because he didn't realize what I was playing.
Right.
It still worked because we're playing the same notes, but I was adding 2 extra notes that he had never even heard. And he's like, wait, that's what you play? Yeah, bro, we've been playing this for like 5 years. It's the same song. That's what I've been playing. So it's like, you don't really, like, studio is a very hard aspect of recording. Like, that is the hardest part, is to go into studio and create an album. Because you can record it and put it out there. Yeah, people will listen to it. But to get that goosebumps when you listen to it, and that is when you know you finally finished it. And that's the most difficult spot and hardest thing to do, is accomplish giving yourself goosebumps when you're constantly criticizing yourself and what you're able to do is, I find, very difficult.
Especially coming off the stage, because when you play these songs live and the crowd feeds it back to you, it feels incredible and the song sounds like $1,000,000. And then when you hear that first version of the recording and there's no crowd cheering you on and there's no rushing by the time you get to the end of the song because you're now playing it to a click, it's a whole different feeling, and it's so hard to get that same sort of feeling in your chest of playing a song live. And then once you record it, you got to remember, okay, there's no crowd cheering, there's no band behind me who's going to high five me for that solo. Like, you got to remember that in the studio, it's a very different context, and it's going to feel very dry and sterile at first. And it doesn't mean the song's different than it is when you play it live. It doesn't mean it's not as good, but it's a very different feeling.
It is. It's very... This is why music was recorded the way it was back in the day. And that's why music sounds different today, is they would do one take with the whole band, and you would get that genuine magic versus okay, record.
Yep.
It's definitely
All right,
something lacking.
give me just that third verse again.
Exactly. There is something lacking when you're not doing it together.
Yeah.
And it's how the industry is. Because if you want to write a song, that's how it has to be done. It's very copy-paste. That's how you write music in the industry, right? Writing songs in a band is different versus putting it down on tape.
Where it all is now, absolutely, yeah.
It's definitely become, it's evolved, but I think that where we are in time musically is the best time. We have access to so many different avenues that you can do yourself, where before you had to there was so many people competing for that top prize and getting picked up by major labels back in the day. Pardon me. Where major labels now are only strictly around for merchandise.
That's right.
They're not putting out the albums anymore. They're not doing anything realistically. So independence musically, as a musician, is a very valuable thing, because I think that we're the only art form that has that independence right now, which will eventually rub off on every other art form. Because yes, painters have independence, but they don't have it in the sense of what musicians do, where we can control our entire career. They have to worry about dealers and galleries and stuff. Eventually they'll be opening their own galleries out of their own pocket, and they realize that that independence is more valuable than worrying about, oh, I got into that gallery. It's, I started my own gallery. Why do I need them? That's kind of what the music industry did. We don't need the record labels. We're just going to do it at home.
That's right. With the industry moving towards this sort of overreach, musicians wanted to take that power back. Independent labels started popping up, and then with the internet and now so many avenues for musicians to get their music out there, so much accessibility for people to get the music they want to listen to. Now you can make music in any genre at any level and be heard, when in the past it used to be only the top level musicians got heard and only the musicians that fit the genre of the time. When it was time for disco, it was time for disco. Nobody was making hardcore music. A hardcore band had no chance of having any sort of a platform or a shot. But now there's so many people who want to hear everything, that no matter what you're doing, there's an audience for it, and there's a connection there that can be made. So yeah, I would agree that is one of the best times to be a musician that there's been. Yes, any sort of a record label will take as much as they can from you if you join, and the nature of the industry has gotten a little businessy, but there's just so much more opportunity for musicians to make the music they want to be making than there's ever been before.
Yeah,
so
you don't have to spend $2,000 to go to a studio.
That's right.
You can spend that $2,000 on an entire setup to record yourself for the rest of your life, right? So it is definitely the best time. I think it's just trying to govern which way to go about it in your best interest is the hardest thing as a musician these days, because there's millions of different platforms to get big on. It's realistically just staying true to your art, and like I said earlier, is that 10 years of hard, dedicated work is when you finally make it. And
oh yeah, it's a grind.
It is a grind, but I mean, realistically, everything in life that's worth it is a grind.
Yep. They say it takes something like 10,000 hours to really master something, and I think the bit of that is, yes, it's an intimidatingly large number to begin with, but a lot of people forget the fact that there's more to it than any particular thing. Yeah. You can put 10 hours into playing the guitar and master the heck out of it, but if you've never played with another musician before, that 10-hour 10,000 hour counter is still at 0. The touring, the management, the logistics, the interpersonal connections, all of these things need that 10,000 hours before you've got a chance of really standing out from the crowd. And 10 years before you really start to meld with the guys you're working with, 10 years before you really start to understand all of the nuances about making records and playing shows. Because it sounds so simple at first, you know, play a few chords with a few guys, but as you start to get into things, there's a whole lot more going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. If there was any advice that you could give aspiring musicians besides what you just said, because that was pretty hammer on the nail there, what would it be?
Do it now. You got to get started. The time is slipping away faster than you can possibly imagine. The speed at which things happen in this industry, in this world, in this game is mind-boggling, you know? I'm sure that during this conversation, an unbelievable amount of records have been released. An uncountable number of new songs have just hit Spotify. And if you're not trying to keep up with what's going on, it will leave you behind, and you're going to end up down the road looking back at what you've wanted to accomplish and just never got around to. So you got to get started while you can, and just the earlier you start with it, the more you get to do, and it's worth doing.
Awesome. I want to thank you for having us, and I really appreciate this conversation.
Come back anytime. You're always welcome to my basement,
Thanks,
Rob.
Freddie. We'll see you guys next time.